I'm Jason Aponte. This is 49ers Talk. I have a very, very special guest, Ross Tucker, former NFL player, current NFL analyst. Ross, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about this NFC Championship game with me.
Jason, it is my pleasure. I'm fired up for it. I wish I could be there, but I can't be two places at once. I'll actually be on the sideline for the Ravens and the Chiefs right before it. Then I'll hop in the car and I'll probably listen to the first half. Thankfully, I don't live that far from Baltimore here in Central PA. So I'll be able to watch the whole second half, but I'll be listening to my guys, Kevin Harlan, Kurt Warner on the first half for sure.
That's awesome. So before we get into the NFC Championship, tell me a little bit about your podcast network, Ross.
Yeah, honestly, dude, I just lucked out. I soon after I retired from football, I was writing for Sports Illustrated. ESPN hired me over and asked they wanted to pay me more to write for them. I said, okay, sure. And then they said, do you want to host our podcast? I said, absolutely, I would love to. Jay, I literally had no idea what a podcast was. This is like 2009, maybe 2010. So I did that for 3 years. Next thing I know, I started the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, and then all my buddies were playing fantasy, so I did Fantasy Feast, and then everybody was betting, or at least some of my buddies were betting a lot. So I went to Even Money Betting Podcast. So I guess the next thing I knew, I kind of had a network and several different shows, and the Ross Tucker Football Podcast is daily. They're all 25 minutes or less, and people seem to enjoy them. And I was like one of the OGs in the podcast game. Thank goodness.
I'm so glad you brought up Fantasy Feast because I remember I had a job where I drove around all the time, and you and Evan Silva would dump all this information on me while I was trying to beat my friends at the time. So I remember that podcast fondly. I'm so glad you brought that up, man. It's really cool to see everything grow for you, Ross. You're really great at what you do, by the way.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. You know what? It's very simple. I'm 44, almost 45. I haven't gotten a real job yet, and I'm not planning on getting a real job. That's the whole goal right now.
That's awesome. All right, Ross, because we know that we got you for just a few minutes because you're a very busy man. I wanted to ask you about the media and the hesitance to give Brock Purdy any sort of praise. And my theory before I pass it to you is it's a lot of draftism that it's so easy to bet against the last pick in the draft than it is to not give a first round draft pick 6 and 7 chances because they were drafted there for a reason. Well, everybody passed on Brock Purdy. I feel like it's so much easier to just bet against a young man because it's something that nobody's ever seen.
By the way, I forgot to mention all those shows are on the DraftKings network. I got to
There you go.
mention that.
There you go.
I've never heard that term before, Jason. I love it, and I'm going to start using it. And I'm going to
Perfect.
forget that you're the one that told me. But draftism is amazing. That's amazing. That's exactly what it is. I would say it's threefold. Okay. Number one, draftism for sure is a big part of it, right? Like if he were a first round pick, like even like Mac Jones, okay, people would just talk about how accurate he is, how smart he is, how efficient he is, and that's why he got drafted where he did. So it's one of my most frustrating things about the NFL is how long your draft status stays with you, right? I mean, it's hilarious to me to watch some of these first round picks that get like 3 years. Like they can be terrible for 3 years and they keep getting opportunities, they keep getting chances. Whereas if you're like me, an undrafted free agent, if you're bad once, you're done. I mean, like you just don't get those opportunities. So draftism is a very real thing. I think the second biggest part of that is I'm going to call it highlight videoism. If you're going to go draftism, I'm going to call it highlightism. And the problem with Brock Purdy is he doesn't do things that wow us physically, right? Like he doesn't run over guys like Josh Allen. He doesn't run all over the place like Lamar Jackson. He doesn't make ridiculous sideways throws like Mahomes or Josh Allen or some of these guys. He doesn't have a cannon like Justin Herbert. He doesn't physically wow us. You know who else didn't physically wow us? Tom Brady. You know who else didn't really physically wow us? Drew Brees. And I think those guys always got discounted a little bit, to a lesser extent, Peyton Manning, because his last name was Manning. He was number 1 overall pick. But we have become, because of social media, such a highlight reel social media clip society that there are people that think that Justin Fields is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy because Justin Fields has a stronger arm and because Justin Fields has some ridiculously impressive plays where he runs all over the field and runs in for a touchdown or whatever. That is not what makes somebody good or not. That is potential. That shows their upside, their ceiling, their ability to make plays. Those are all wonderful things. What separates non-NFL players from NFL players, average from good, good from great, it's consistency. It's how often you can perform at a really high level. Nobody ever watched Tom Brady, Jay, and was like, oh my gosh, did you see that 7-yard pass to Wes Welker? Oh, wow, did you see that the way he threw the ball in 1.5 seconds to Edelman for 8 yards? No. And you know what people said? Brady's a system quarterback. Brady's O-line's so great. Oh, really? How has that worked out for New England since Brady left? And what did Brady do when he went to Tampa and won a Super Bowl? It's not the system. It's the person operating the system. The last thing is Kyle Shanahan's a really good coach. In fact, all of those guys from the Shanahan tree are. There's a reason why Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins had the number 1 ranked offense in the league. There's a reason why LaFleur and Jordan Love very much exceeded expectations towards the second half of the year and in the postseason, and almost beat your guys, by the way. There's a reason why Sean McVay is getting incredible efficiency from that offense and ridiculous production from 5th-round picks like Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua. It works. Bobby Slowick in Houston. It works. It's good. It's a good system. But you still need someone to operate the system at a high level. I had a tweet yesterday, supporting Brock Purdy, and it was a joke that if you're not real bright, or if you didn't actually think about what I said,
it was so obvious.
You wouldn't have gotten. I thought it was obvious. I said Brock Purdy equals system quarterback. Can you even imagine a legit talent like Trey Lance in that offense? The mind blown emoji. Listen, if you pay attention, like if you actually read it and you pay attention at all, you're well aware that the Niners drafted Trey Lance, traded a lot to get him. He was in that system and it didn't work out. So maybe it's not as easy as just putting a quarterback in a system, despite how much talent Trey Lance is. Maybe you need to have someone that's really smart and really accurate, like Brock Purdy.
Couldn't agree more. The traits are starting to outweigh the processing and the harder parts. There's been so many times and instances on film where Brock Purdy is throwing the football and there's no receiver in there and he runs into the window. Justin Fields, other guys have to see those type of throws be open. They have to be open to throw those things. In this offense, what Kyle Shanahan demands is the processing, understanding, seeing the game how he sees it. And if if Kyle Shanahan wanted Justin Fields, he could have drafted him in number 3. So I can't understand anyone even trying to bring up that sort of discussion with Justin Fields. But I'm glad you did bring up Kyle Shanahan because this team has been very close. It's been 3 straight years in the NFC Championship game. Everyone labels Kyle Shanahan a genius. The offense is spreading across the league. You know, whether you're running the full system, you're running something that Kyle has run. Does this feel like a do or die season kind of, or just like a moment that he needs to seize because he cannot continue to be the guy who gets the team close and doesn't finish the job?
Well, there will always be that perception of Kyle until he wins one, but that's everybody, right? I mean, that's Josh Allen and Sean McDermott in Buffalo. That's Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. You know, that's really everybody until they win one. And honestly, Jay, they don't really say that about you until you're knocking on the door a lot. You know what I mean? Like you got to go to a lot of conference championship games and make it to a Super Bowl before people start having this knock on can't win the big one on you. I will say this is a golden opportunity playing at home as the number 1 seed against Detroit. You just don't know when these chances are going to come, right? And I know the perception is the Niners will be good for years, and maybe they will, and that'd be great. But Green Bay's coming. Philly is a pretty good chance they'll bounce back. And I said this last year when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl. You know, I do a lot of stuff in Philadelphia media when they were the Eagles in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. That they had to make the most of that. That was the best roster in the league. It was the best roster in team history. I thought they were the best team in the NFL last year, and they didn't get it done. You know why? Because the Chiefs are really stinking good. As you guys know, the Chiefs, Andy Reid and Mahomes are like the new Belichick and Brady, where it feels like you almost have to play a perfect game to beat them in the playoffs, right? Like we've seen this now so many years. The Niners had such a good game. You know, Jimmy G misses the one throw, they lose. The Eagles, Hurts was awesome, but that fumble return for a touchdown was the difference in the game. Like they're very unlikely to beat themselves. So you got to beat them. And we'll see whether or not Baltimore can do it. I personally think Baltimore is the best team in the league. And there's a lot of statistics that back that up. They're extremely impressive on both sides of the ball. But that doesn't mean, you know, I would love to go through the Super Bowl sometime and just decide in my mind how many years the team I really thought was the best team that year won the Super Bowl. It doesn't matter, right? All that matters is who wins. But it's not always the best team. I thought the Eagles were better than the Chiefs last year. And if they played them 5 times, they would have beaten them 3 or 4 of them potentially. But that's not who won it. And maybe other years, maybe the year before when the Bengals beat the Chiefs were really better. I don't know. But you got to win that game that day. Golden opportunity for the Niners to at least get to the Super Bowl. And then once they get there, obviously they'll have a very formidable foe. But I think this would be a bad loss, to your point. I think it'd be a bad loss to lose at home to Detroit. This is one as a touchdown favorite. You got to win this game if you're Kyle Shanahan.
100%. And you know, again, it's very hard to do, you know, what this team has done. It's very hard to win a championship. There's a little bit of luck involved for almost everybody, which I don't understand why people are trying to knock down what they did against Green Bay. Because there's instances across all Super Bowl champions when they win games that they had no business winning or didn't play well for 3 quarters, but that's what good teams do and they move on. I have a quick question for you. Keys for the 49ers to win this game against the Detroit Lions. I love their offense. I love their weapons. I love what Ben Johnson has been able to do, marrying a lot of the concepts that worked for Jared Goff in LA and making him, in my opinion, better than he ever was in LA here in Detroit. Also helps to have a bunch of studs up front. This Detroit Lions team is another team that you're going to have to deal with for years and years because they're loaded and they're young. But what are the keys that you feel for the 49ers to move on to Las Vegas?
So a couple that jump out on the defensive side of the ball, and they probably both have to do with the guys up front. I think number one, they can do a better job stopping the run than they did against the Packers. You know, that front needs to be more dominant and not just stopping the run, getting a pass rush. You know, the Lions do so much play action, under center play action. I'm curious whether or not the Niners can find a way to get a rush, right? What happens is if it's first down play action, the defensive linemen a lot of times are thinking run and stopping the run. By the time they transition rush and realize, oh no, it's actually a pass, that's a hard thing to do. It's hard to go from locking your guy out, stopping the run, to next thing you know, oh boy, I got to transition. This is a pass. That's why Jared Goff, it looks like he has all kinds of time. So I would say that on the defensive side of the ball. Offensive side of the ball, I had no idea, Jay, until hosting the Even Money podcast this week on the DraftKings Network. Do you know that Deebo Samuel is the single most valuable non-quarterback player in the NFL from a point spread perspective? When my co-host on the Even Money betting podcast said that, I was like, wait, what? How is that possible? They have Brandon Ayuk and Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. And do you know that? I'm sure you know this. The Niners average 2 yards more per play when Deebo's in there than when he's not. That equates to 1.5 to 2 points against the spread. So
Wow.
that's how much of a difference maker Debo is. Needs to be healthy and needs to be Debo. I think he'll be out there. We'll see if he's full throttle Debo or not. And then I also think, they need to attack the corners. The Lions, it's rare for a team to get to the Super Bowl and win it if they have a clear issue or hole in their roster. And for the Detroit Lions, it's their corners. They're not good. Like they'll probably sign a free agent and draft the guy in the first round. They need to get better at corner. They're susceptible there. They know it. Niners know it. We all know it. The Niners need to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and good news for the Niners fans. Debo practiced today in a limited capacity. Sounds like that's optimistic moving forward. And the Detroit Lions, if I'm not mistaken, run man coverage at top 5, I think, in the league right now. And the 49ers and Brock Purdy have been number 1 in almost every category against man coverage. Russ, I know we got a time crunch. 2 questions for you, and then I'll get you out of here. 1, you had a very controversial take that spread all over the internet. I wrote an article about it on Niners Nation. It's about kickers. And Ross, I know this is our first time interacting in this medium. We've met before, but I, from a kicker standpoint, have a positional value issue with drafting kickers, not the position itself. You had a far different take. Would you care to elaborate on that take? Because I feel like there's only a little clip out there, and there's only so many words for you to elaborate on that and make sure that you get your point across.
Yeah,
I believe
yeah,
that it
no.
started with, what is it? Kicking shouldn't be allowed in the NFL anymore.
Well, I'm not a fan of kicking in general in the NFL, and certainly not how important kicking is in the NFL. And I've always felt this way. It always has seemed out of place for me. And I know there's always been kickers. And I know that most people aren't able to think outside the box, right? But my question to you, Jason, would be like, if we sat down and we were starting football from scratch, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's 100 yards and 53 and a third. And, you got 11 guys on each side, and they're going to block each other and tackle each other. And they can run with the ball, throw the ball. They can catch the ball. And we're going over this, right? At a table. I feel like if someone was at that table and they raised their hand, they were like, I got an idea. At the end of the game, then, let's have a guy come off the sideline who doesn't do any of those other things. Doesn't block, tackle, run, catch, throw. He does nothing else that the other 22 guys do. But he comes on just at the end of the game and actually kicks the ball through these poles. Like, I feel like if we really started now and looked at it through that prism, we would all look at the guy at the table and be like, what? What are you talking about? That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. That would be like at the end of like a hockey game. Like, instead of going to overtime, the goaltenders do a push-up contest. Like, what are we talking about? I mean, it's like it has nothing to do with the rest of the sport. It has always been out of place to me. I've never understood it. People always say, oh, what are you going to do differently? Well, okay, number one, there could be a minimum snap requirement to kick the ball, which I love. Let's say you have to play 20% of the snaps to kick the ball. I would love to see guys like the punters and kickers be actual players that have to do other things on the field. I think that would be very intriguing. And that would actually add to the intrigue. We could also just get rid of kicking altogether, and you have to go for it on 4th down. And after you score a touchdown, maybe there's no 2-point conversion. Maybe there is, and you have to go for it. And the last idea, I would actually rather than a kicker, I would rather have the quarterbacks have to throw the ball to the field goal post, right? Like, same thing as a field goal, but they have to throw, that's at least something that they're doing during the game. And then Josh Allen could probably make a really long throw goal or whatever we're going to call it, right? Like, anyway, a lot of people hate it. They think it sounds stupid. That's fine. I've been called worse. It doesn't make sense to me that there's these huge, fast guys running into each other all game. So a guy that played soccer in high school can come off the bench and decide who wins. That is just weird if you really think about it.
Yeah, it's so good. Ross Tucker, thank you. Ross Tucker, NFL. Ross, before you get out of here, what would be, in your mind, the best Valentine's Day gift you could give? And the Super Bowl's on the 11th. For Niners fans, I would think that it's a Super Bowl win.
Yeah, I understand. If you can't get a Super Bowl win though, and you're going to get something for your significant other, right here. Look at that. It's called My Front Page Story. I'm telling you, Jay, you talk to a writer for, I don't know, 10 minutes, or you fill out an email with 5 questions, and this writer writes the most unbelievable story about your significant other. It's incredible. My buddy started the company. That's why I'm helping him spread the word about it. To be able to give it to her and say, honey, I want to do something special and different for you this year. So I had a story written about you. Dude, Jason, that sounds so money. It's not even funny. And then when you talk to the writer, make sure you say to him, I just never thank her enough for all the little things she does for the family. Even if you can't think of anything your wife does for you, just say that. Because I've seen at least 10 videos now where when they read that line, they start crying. It's hilarious. It's like, it's a guaranteed cry rate, happy tear cry rate, next gen stats. MyFrontPageStory.com, MyFrontPageStory.com.
Oh man, I hope my lady's not watching, so I can go ahead and just surprise her with this. Say, hey, look,
Do
honey,
it,
look what I came up with
Jay.
on my own. Ross Tucker, thank you so much. Follow Ross, Ross Tucker NFL. Thank you so much for taking some time and speaking with me. The DraftKings Sportsbook Podcast Network is where everything is for Ross as well. Daily Ross Tucker podcast as well. And I appreciate you so much for doing this, man. You're really such a humble and knowledgeable guy, man.
No, my pleasure, man. Follow me on social at Ross Tucker NFL, at Ross Tucker Pod. That way you can see when all the podcasts are posted and ready for you guys.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch up with you guys later today.